Hey leaders, Caleb here with our content for this month for our Grow Team leadership as we're growing together in our skills of leadership. We're growing together to become excellent leaders who lead like Jesus so that together we can be fruitful for God's kingdom as leaders in our leading our teams and groups and everything we're doing. I'm really excited for what we're going to share this month. It's something that God put very specifically on my heart as a specific tool for us to focus on. It's like a skill of leadership. I think of it like a tool in your tool belt. That's something that we can learn to do really well. So that as leaders, we've got this as a tool to always pull out at the right moment, at the right times. And I think it will be something which can make us really fruitful in our leadership. So yeah, let's get stuck into it. I'm looking forward to that. You can see I've got my new headgear on because I could not get my microphone working for anything. So I've borrowed Jay's gaming headset. So you can either think I look like I'm an air traffic control guy or I'm like a hardcore gamer because we all know how much I love to game. So let's get stuck into it. Hey, I'm going to switch over my screen. We're going to continue our series. We started on leading like Jesus. Last month, or 2 months ago, sorry, last touch point, hopefully you remember, we talked about leading like Jesus in the concept of addition versus multiplication. It was following on from that concept of developing a Wikipedia culture where it's Jesus led in a way that was about empowering people. That's really what we talked about there has impacted me and has changed my perspective. It's changed the way I lead in multiple ways. It's made me a lot more focused on developing sons, not servants. I don't want to lead in a way that I have people who just do what I say. I want to develop sons who get the heart, who get the values, who get that on the inside, so then they can run with it and all God's called them to do. Because that increases our effectiveness and our fruitfulness exponentially when we can do that. I encourage you to keep working towards that, saying how can we grow sons, not servants? How can we lead in a way that it's not about the things we do, it's more about the people we lead. And that the things we do are about, and they're an opportunity for people to grow. It's more about the growth of the people than it is about the actual outputs of what we're producing. So I encourage you to keep working through that as leaders and keep growing in that. We're going to continue this month looking at leading like Jesus and specifically the concept of being master gardeners. I should also confess at this point, because we were talking about being master gardeners, I had this great plan. I was going to go out to the back shed and get a big set of pruning shears, and it was going to be a great prop, and I'd have these big shears and get a photo for it and stuff. But as I record this, it's about 4 degrees and teeming with rain outside, and I decided that I wouldn't do that. We didn't need a prop. But I looked around inside and I did find a gardening glove. So this is your prop to remember that we're master gardeners, just like Jesus. So every time you see a glove, you can say, I'm a master gardener because I'm leading like Jesus. Let's talk about what that means. So first off, we're going to begin with the scripture. So get your Bibles out if you want to, or your Bible app. I'm going to get my trusty paper Bible, which has got the scripture actually highlighted there. Just if you were in doubt of my spirituality, you can highlight it too now if you want to be as spiritual as I. John 15, verses 1 to 2, Jesus talking to his disciples. We are his disciples. He said, I am the true vine, my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit. Okay, straight away there we see two things that the Father does, and by extension Jesus, two specific things they're always looking at. One is that every person, every one of us, everything that happens, they're always evaluating it to say, is this bearing fruit? If it's not bearing fruit, what does he say happens to it? It gets taken away. Talked about other places again, take away and burned. So we don't want to do that. Put your hand up if you don't want to get taken away by Jesus and burned. But they're always evaluating everything to say, is this fruitful? Is this bearing the fruit that it should? Is this being effective and fruitful for God's kingdom? Then if it is being fruitful, there's another layer where then Jesus is always looking at it to say, how can we prune this to make it more fruitful? How can we prune this to improve it, to make it even more fruitful? It's like, we've got a rose bush that's producing great roses. That's nice, but how can we prune it to make it bear even more roses? Jesus actually goes on there to say how his disciples, he's already been pruning them by the words he's been speaking to them. He's been specifically teaching them and growing them through his words, through his teaching, in a way to prune them, to make them more fruitful. So we see here Jesus and the Father always evaluating to say, is this fruitful, and how can we prune it to make it more fruitful? And that's what I want us to talk about in this session as being leaders like Jesus, is developing a culture. I'm going to call it an evaluation culture, which is a culture we're always looking like Jesus, looking with eyes and a heart that says, hey, is this fruitful? I always want to be bearing the fruit that God's got for me to bear in this role, in this team, whatever we're doing. Everything we're doing, is it fruitful for God's kingdom? And then secondly, how can we prune it and make it more fruitful? What can we do with this to make it actually become more fruitful for God's kingdom? How can we improve it? How can we prune it? What can we shave away from it? What can we cut away? What could we grow? What could we do to grow and develop and become more fruitful? So we're going to talk about this as leaders developing this culture, this evaluation culture, and we're going to get really actually practical and specific. So I don't think I said it before. If you haven't already, grab out your notebooks or your laptops or your smartphones, whatever you're going to use to take notes, because we'll be going through some specific questions for you to answer as we do this. Questions that are going to be quite specific to you and your role and exactly how you can implement this leading like Jesus. So to look at this evaluation culture, we're going to look at the why, what, how, when, who, I think. Not in that order, but you get the picture. We're going to start with why. So why? When we're evaluating, what is it that we're evaluating for? Why are we looking at it? And it's the same thing that Jesus said. Firstly, we're looking for fruitfulness. So when we're developing this culture of evaluating, so as leaders, we're driving this culture where we're always looking at how can we be fruitful? How can we be more fruitful? The first thing we need to look at is the fruitfulness. How fruitful is this? What fruit should be growing? I've put there, what fruit should you be growing? What are your goals? If you're, as a leader, are going to be able to evaluate anything in your team, in yourself correctly, you need to be able to answer that question, what are the goals of this? You know, if you are going to evaluate, say you're a grow team leader, you're going to evaluate your team, you want to constantly be growing in your team's fruitfulness, you need to know what are the goals of your team. You know, otherwise it's like having a, pardon me, we've got an apple tree outside and say it's just blossoming in these beautiful flowers. I say, oh, this is so beautiful. What a lovely, this apple tree is amazing because look at the beautiful flowers. But then, you know, someone comes to eat and that, well, this tree is useless because there's no fruit. We say, oh, but we're really happy with it. Look at the beautiful flowers. It's not, it's useless. It's not effective. It's not doing what it's designed to do. So it's really important for us to know what is it that we're doing? What is it that we're going for in ourselves, in our team, in our role? If you're leading a life group, what are the goals of your life group? What are you leading a life group for? What are the wins for your life group? You know, because there are things that might look like wins, but they're actually flowers on an apple tree. You say that's not the specific things we're going for. That's not actually the goals that we've got. That's just a nice extra. You know, same if you're leading a grow team. If you've got any role in Breakthrough, which we all have. So I want you to actually start by now writing some thoughts to that question. You can pause the video throughout as we do this, so feel free to pause me and write down what are my goals in my role? What are my goals as a leader? What are the goals of my team? What are the goals of my role in Breakthrough? What are they? What are the things that we're going after? Obviously, in the big picture, we know our goals are to glorify God. We know that the Breakthrough mission is discipling, so everything we're doing is towards glorifying God and discipling. Every single thing we do. But all of our different parts, our different teams, our life groups, our different roles, they all play different parts that together we make up the body and together we're fulfilling that mission of discipling. It's really important for us to know what our part is. You know, otherwise that's like a hand getting really excited because you can run so fast. It's like, hey, that's lovely, but you're not actually there to do the running. You're there to be the hand. We need to know what is our part, what are the specific goals that we have for our team, for our group. So if you've written that down, what are your goals for you as a leader in your role? The second thing we're going to be constantly evaluating is the process. So how are we achieving our goals? What is our atmosphere? And we've been very deliberate in defining what this process should look like by developing what we've called the Breakthrough Code. Hopefully you'll remember how we've talked about the concept. The Breakthrough Code doesn't define the island we're swimming to, it defines the water we're swimming in. You know, the Breakthrough Code is 10 values that define our culture, it defines our atmosphere. And so we always need to be evaluating not only are we going after the right goals, are we getting to the island, are we doing the things, but are we doing it in the right way? Are we doing it in a way that's creating an atmosphere in line with the Breakthrough Code? Is our team operating in a way that embodies the Breakthrough Code? Are we making the Breakthrough Code the way we do life at Breakthrough? Are we making that the atmosphere that we live in, that we do church life in? So those are the two things that we're always going to be evaluating: our fruitfulness and the process. Is this fruitful? Is it bearing the fruit it should be? Is it achieving the goals it should? And secondly, is it doing it in the right way? Is it achieving those goals with the correct atmosphere? Is it embodying the breakthrough code? So take a minute if you want and write down again the goals for your team. Make sure you got all that there. Why don't you take a minute to have a look at the breakthrough code and write down the 10 values. Just put them on the paper wherever you're writing your notes there, and say, all my evaluation is based on achieving these goals in this way, bearing this fruit with this process, and we're going to be constantly evaluating that. So that's the why of our evaluating. So once you've done that, we'll jump on to the next one, and that is the what. What is it that we are evaluating as leaders at Breakthrough? I've broken this into 4 sections. Again, as we chat through this, I'd love you to actually write down very specifically for you, in your team, in your role, what is it that you should actually be evaluating? What is it specifically that you should be evaluating? Get specific, name the specific roles, name the specific things you're doing, the outputs, whatever that is. So I'll talk through that, but again, feel free to pause me as much as you need, stop and reflect, write down your answers as we go. What are we evaluating? Firstly, we're always evaluating ourselves. As leaders, it is absolutely vital that we are constantly growing, we are constantly evaluating ourselves as leaders. So that means in our leadership craft, in our leadership skills, how am I leading? Do I lead well? Do I lead in a way that aligns with the breakthrough values? do I lead and use the skills that we're developing here? Am I leading in a way that's fruitful? And just generally in our walk with Jesus. If our walk with Jesus is not healthy, if that's not kicking goals, if that's not in line creating a good atmosphere, then nothing else is going to be working. So constantly we're evaluating ourselves. The second one I've got there, which is a really nice practical one, is we always evaluate anytime we gather. So if you're a Grow Team leader, those will be your Grow Team touch points. Evaluate every single time you have a Grow Team touch point. You need to be evaluating that really clearly. Did we hit our goals? Was it fruitful? Was the breakthrough code being embodied? How can we be growing that and pruning it to make it better? Life group leaders, the same. Every time you have a life group meeting, did we hit our goals? What was the process like? How can we prune? What ideas? How can we make it better? How can we make it more effective? So that's a really nice simple one. Number 3, any team or group output. So I've put some examples there. I've said like Sunday worship. That's an output that your team creates together. The creative team come together, and each Sunday they lead a worship time. That's the guys on the stage, in the media booth, in the live stream studio, wherever they are. We come together and we lead people in a time of worship. It's really important to evaluate that and say, all right, did we hit our goals? Was it fruitful? Was it effective? Did we do it in the right code, in the right ways? How can we prune it and make it more effective? We're just going to be going over this over and over. I've got other examples there. Events. Anytime an event happens, the events team will be evaluating the same way. Communications. Anytime we send out communications, comms team evaluating. Super Kid lessons. Anytime we create Super Kids lessons, evaluate. Did we hit it? Was it fruitful? How could we be more fruitful? How could we prune it? I've said there, live stream. That's a specific output that our team creates. Cafe time. That's a specific output that part of the events team will create. That cafe time before or after church. They're just some examples. Pardon me. So write down for whatever it is. If you're a life group leader, team, Grow Team leader especially, Grow Teams especially will have a lot more outputs of things that the teams are producing. Write down, all right, these are the things that my team is producing. These are the specific group outputs that we should be evaluating constantly. And then number 4, we've got individual outputs. And this is where it sort of comes down a level to become more individual or more specific. It could be things that are literally just one person doing. So let's go to the creative team for some examples. It could be mixing the audio. Was it fruitful? Was it good? Did it line up with the values? How can we prune it and make it more effective? Mixing audio. Was it leading the worship? Who was the worship leader? Playing drums, being the live stream host. Whatever Grow Team you're in. It might be specifically a Super Kid lesson that someone put together. If you're events team, you might be doing the host role, or you're greeting people, or you're serving people at Eden. Whatever it is, it could be individual outputs that are still with multiple people working on them. Could be a particular social media post I've got there. It could be someone leading a study at Life Group. Maybe at Life Group there's a particular person who's leading this study or leading this prayer time. All right, great. How can we evaluate that? How can we prune that and make it more fruitful and help them grow through that process? So, pardon me. Again, if you haven't already, pause the video, write down under each of those for you specifically in your role. And I recognize Grow team leaders will have probably a lot more to write down here than Life Group leaders, just because of the nature of the role and what you're doing. What are all the things that you could be evaluating? Some Grow team leaders, Chris is the creative team leader, especially. That's a wide range of people, a wide range of things. There's probably going to be a lot there, so don't get overwhelmed. don't get stressed out that it's like, there's a trillion new things I need to do. We're going to do this sustainably and work towards it. But whatever your Grow team is, whatever it is that your role is, just try and write down and think through. Right, these are the outputs and the things that we can be evaluating in that space. So I'll give you a second to do that, or you can just pause it. We'll go over to the next slide, where we're going to look at the who. So now we know why we're evaluating. We know what we're looking for, fruitfulness and the code. We know what we're evaluating, so all our outputs, everything we create, everything we do, every time we gather, and ourselves personally. I want to look now at who does that evaluation, because that's a really important question to answer, and it can differ based on what we're evaluating, based on the output. Some will be more effective or more fruitful than others in certain times. Excuse me. First one I've got here is self. I think self-evaluation is hugely, hugely beneficial. Self-evaluation could refer to just an individual, like you evaluating yourself, or an individual in your team evaluating themselves. You played drums this week, evaluating how you did in that role and how you went. It could also be teams as a whole evaluating themselves as a team. So, the media team coming together and evaluating, how did we do? Let's self-evaluate ourselves as a team, if that makes sense. That can have great ownership value, I think, for people to evaluate their team themselves. That's often an excellent starting point. I have a quick side note here. I think anytime we're doing self-evaluation, the more that we can have really objective things to mark that against is really helpful. From a music perspective, my self-evaluation is 100 times better when I record myself and listen back to it than just sing something and listen to it and then how did it feel, how did it go. Stopping and listening back to it, I can make a much more objective self-evaluation. So that's a musical example. I would encourage you, in whatever space you're in, always try and be able to take that step back and find a way to do it objectively. If you can record yourself doing something, that's just a powerful way of self-evaluation. Obviously, it looks different in different spaces, but that's just an encouragement for yourself or people in your team. The more you can have something objective to look at or watch, that can be helpful. Number 2 is leaders. We want every leader at Breakthrough to have a person, we're calling it the Help Me Grow leader, who they answer to is the wrong word, but they go to for their growth. That's a really important person for your evaluation process. That's a really important person to be getting evaluation. How fruitful is this? How can we prune it? What thoughts do you have on this? How can we grow this to make it more effective, more fruitful? I've said, those in authority, it might not always necessarily be just your Help Me Grow leader. There can be other leaders and people who will have an authority in the space that you're working. There's pastoral leadership. Obviously, I'm not saying every one of us in every role we go to the pastoral leadership to get our evaluation. Pastor Peter, I played the second rhythm guitar on Sunday. Could you give me your evaluation? Probably not going to be appropriate, but I'm just recognizing there'll be times and spaces for that sort of thing. Team leadership. There can be leadership inside a team or over a team, or leaders over groups of teams and that sort of thing. So people who are in authority and have responsibility, and leaders, can be very, very helpful for evaluating. Third one, they're teammates or group members. That can be really, really valuable. I reckon if you are in a team of other people working with you, that can be a great space to get other people's perspectives. It's really important in this that we have the perspective in doing this. we're not just asking for people to critique us, or we're not just looking for opportunities to critique others. That this is all in a culture and a space where we just want to grow together. So we're asking for input. Um, and so, I think teammates or group members can give a perspective that other people can't, because they're on the ground with you. They're working alongside you. I've said there they can give a healthy range of perspectives. They can reveal blind spots and give you new ideas that you might not have thought of. So if you're a grow team leader, lean on the other grow team leaders. Say, hey guys, could you give me some thoughts on this? How could I grow here? How could I prune this? How could I make this more fruitful? If you're in a team, use the others in your team with you, because they're a really valuable resource to help you grow together. And at the same time, you're a valuable resource to them. So look for opportunities to help them evaluate. Look for opportunities to help them prune, to help them grow. Because again, this is not critiquing or criticizing what's being done. It's a desire together to grow and to be effective in growing together. The fourth one I've got there is anyone. Sometimes by just getting the perspective of people outside that space, you can get creative input and unexpected perspectives that you just would not have thought of, and that can be really, really valuable. I've multiple times gotten ideas from people who are just not in my space, but they just by getting some perspectives or some input there, it can be really valuable. Obviously, you don't put everyone's evaluation and input on the same level. If your Help Me Grow leader says this is really what you should go after, and then Joe on the street says no, this is really what you should go after, I'll give you a quick answer there. Go after your Help Me Grow leader, because they're an authority. They're bought into that. But Joe on the street might have some cool thoughts. Now I'm saying Joe on the street. That's probably talking about just a random person. But let's throw an example for that one. Let's say that Jay's running the live stream on Sunday. He's the live stream host, and so he's talking there. And someone who's been on live stream the last 3 weeks, he could chat to them and say, "Hey, when you were on live stream, could you tell me, did you feel like you were really a part of it, or did you feel like you were watching on? Were there particular points in the service where you felt you were distanced from worship, or you particularly felt engaged with it? Was there, pardon me, other things I could say, or things that I could do in live stream to help you feel more engaged and more a part of it?" Because that guy who was on live stream is going to have a totally different perspective to anyone else. We could all have great input, but his Help Me Grow leader was probably in church worshipping. The rest of his team was probably in church worshipping. We were all in church worshipping, but that person was on live stream, so they've got a unique perspective that they can help prune some stuff. Say, that will make us more fruitful. That will help us, but we wouldn't have thought of that because we didn't see that perspective. We weren't there. So I encourage you in your developing this evaluation culture to think about who can I use to help me prune, to help me be more fruitful, to help me be more effective. So if you haven't already, as I've been talking, feel free to pause. I'd love you to go through each of the ones you wrote down before, like each of the spaces that you would be evaluating, so yourself and your team outputs and your individual outputs and that sort of thing. And for each of those, jot down some thoughts about who would be the best person to evaluate this, who would be good people to potentially evaluate this, who would be useful people. Try and get really practical. Try and not just be conceptual, but try and be quite practical with who would be a really good person to help evaluate this, to help give some feedback, to help give some input here that would help it grow, that could give us perspective that would be helpful for growth. So you can pause the video and do that, and then we'll go on to the last couple quickly. If I can get my mouse across to the screen. Pardon me. Next one we're going to look at is... did I skip one? When? Oh, no, I didn't. When? We'll cover this one a bit more quickly. In terms of when do we evaluate, 3 keys I've got here. One I've said is continually. Let's just get a culture of constant evaluation. That everything we're doing, we're always thinking about how can we make this more fruitful? How can we make this more effective for God's kingdom? How can we grow this? What can we do here? I think that's a healthy culture for us to have, and that's important for us to grow. I've then put two key times. I've said before and after. When we say before and after, I'm talking about if there's a specific, let's call it an output. Maybe the output is Sunday worship, or just an event we're running, or a Super Kids lesson, or a communication we're sending out. It's the thing that's going to be evaluated. If you can evaluate it beforehand, gee, that's really powerful because you can change it before it becomes the output. As an example of that, for this for this video, I wrote up all my notes, I wrote my script, and then I went to Pastor Peter, who, in this space, he's my Help Me Grow leader for the Breakthrough Leadership Grow team, and I said, hey, this is what I want us to work through, next month. Can you give me your feedback? Can you evaluate it with me? And that was really helpful because that gave me a range of extra feedback and extra thoughts and things that I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have had that perspective, didn't think that. Yep, that gives clarity here. That's really helpful. Now, you're all the beneficiaries of that because you get the evaluated version of this video, of my notes. Otherwise, you would have gotten the pre-evaluated version, which was still pretty good. I think it was really good. But it definitely wasn't as good. And then Dad could have evaluated that, and I could have still grown through it, but you all wouldn't have gotten the benefit of the grown version. So the more we can evaluate beforehand, the more powerful it is. That can be raw. It can be frustrating when you put something together and get it evaluated, and it comes back, you need to change this. You should do this. Like, no, but I've done it. It can be frustrating. It can be raw and exposing as all this can, but I encourage you. Our culture, our heart, it's about pruning and fruitfulness. It's about growing and long-term fruit. And so it's helpful. It's worthwhile. It's part of the process of growing. So that's before and then after. And it's a really important point to say when we're evaluating something after it's happened, after the output. So after they've led worship, after they've preached, after they've done the host role, after the event's over, after the Super Kid lesson's done, after we've sent out the communication, we look back and we evaluate it. That evaluation has to be focused all about the long-term growth, all about how can we grow for next time. We are not a culture, I want to make this really clear, we are not a culture that's into picking apart performance or critiquing performances. That is not what we do. That is not fruitful. That is not helpful. And that's just not what we do. That is not who we are at Breakthrough. That doesn't match our code. It doesn't match our values, and it doesn't bear lasting fruit. We are not a criticize performance, pick apart what someone's done. That's just not fruitful, and that's not who we are. But we are about long-term fruit, which means critically evaluating what we've done for the fruitfulness of next time. We want to critically evaluate. Now, when I say critically, I don't mean, critically as in like be critical, like be rude. I mean, look at it with a genuine, real sense of how can we make this better? Critical evaluation is about how can this grow? How can we prune? What can we do to help this grow and be even more fruitful next time? Because that's the key. We're all at the base level on the same page that we're about kingdom fruit. And so this is about how can we be more kingdom fruitful together. That's what everything has to be rooted in, what everything has to be based in, is developing more kingdom fruit. I've got a note there that when we evaluate afterwards, I said the execution of the product is not the end. It's really easy to have a perspective. Let's just talk about, say, an event, because that's a really easy example. There's all this build up to the event, and then the event happens, and then that's the end. It's like, awesome, it's done. Yay, that's great. We need to be really careful that our culture says the event or the output, the Super Kid lesson, the worship time, whatever it is, that's not the end of the process. That's just a part of the process. There's like build up to there's the output, but then there are really important things that come after that are still a really vital part of the process. And we have to build a culture that we say, it really genuinely is vital. We can't just give it lip service. I've put there some examples like celebration. That's an important part of our culture, that when we don't just get something done and then it's over, we stop and take quality time to celebrate it. And evaluation. The evaluation has to be built in as a key part of the process. We'll talk about more on that on the last slide. But so again, quickly go back to your notes, go through each of the things that you're going to evaluate in your role, and put in there what are some specific times that would be good for each of them. This one would be great to get evaluation beforehand. When would that be? How would that look? How could that happen? This one we'd get evaluation after. Think about when. We already know the who. When could we do that? When would be a good time? When it's obviously still fresh and it's fairly recent, because that makes it more fruitful for next time. So if you haven't already, pause the video, do that. And then we've got the last slide coming up here. The last one, which is really important, is how. I've got 4 key things here with how. I'd love to go through them quickly to finish off. Pardon me. First one, clear questions. When we're evaluating things, we need to have very, very clear questions that we're answering. They need to be based in what we talked about on the very first slide about what are our goals, what's the fruit that we're going after, you know, what is the what are the specific areas of fruitfulness that we're looking for. If we're an apple tree, it's apples, it's not flowers. If we're an orange tree, we're after oranges. What are the specific things there that they have to lead to very clear questions? Clear questions empower evaluation because it gives you boundaries. It allows really clear and critical evaluation in a very specific area, and it really empowers growth as well. It means that rather than just getting a whole, oh, there's a million things I need to fix, okay, I've got like some very specific focuses that I'm looking at, and it empowers me that, okay, I'm going to grow in this way. My example before of Jay doing the live stream, he's got clear questions. My goal is to make the person on the other end, as in one of my goals, sorry, make the person on the other end feel like they're a part of it. They're a part of the family. So he looks at, okay, I've got clear questions. How did I make them feel a part of it today? How did I make them connect with the next steps? Was it easy for them to join a life group, join Team Breakthrough, follow Jesus, take the next steps that we've got for them? Or did they feel like that was for the people in the room? So it's not just how did I do at live stream? It's, okay, did I do these very particular things well in order to achieve my goals, in order to make that happen? And then if I evaluate those and say, no, I didn't do that one super well, well, how can we improve that? How can we prune that? How can we make that more fruitful? I've said there, make them as much as we can measurable. Avoid questions where we can answer them, oh, pretty good, yeah, not bad, that was all right. Dad came up with an example. He said, when he was helping me grow, he said, questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well did you do this? How well did you achieve this? Because that makes you be a bit more critical. Oh, it was pretty good, but okay, was it was it a 7? Or last week I gave it this. You know what? This week I don't think I was quite as good as I was last week, so it's probably only a 6. But it's right. Do you know what I mean? So it just makes you be a bit more critical. It makes it a bit measurable and makes you look at how you're growing with it. Just going through quickly the last 3 things. Lay it out in advance. When we're doing evaluation, I think for it to work, it really has to be a system that we lay out in advance. Like I said before, when the event happens or the output comes, that's not the end of it. That's just a step. The evaluation is still a vital part of it. Those evaluation questions, that evaluation process has to be laid out as a part of the process and something which is very easy, clear, ordered system. Once it's done, like once the event's done, it's too late to think about evaluating it. We have to have the system already laid out so that we're ready to go and be a part of that. So think about how you can put that in as part of it. Number 3, I talked about this a bit more before. It's long-term growth focused. We focus on trends and improvement and change. Trends as in like trending upwards, as in improving, not like wearing trendy clothes. We focus on trends, improvements, and change. We're not about picking apart performance or nitpicking on one-off events or things that happen. Everything we do is focus on how can we grow, how can we make it more fruitful going forwards. And the last note I said, I think these should really engage at least one other person. That closes the loop for growth. It provides accountability and gives you someone who can help you grow through that process and can grow through that with you. Self-evaluation alone is very helpful, but if it's just a person evaluating on their own, there's no sense of team growth happening together. So I think somewhere in this process there has to be at least one other person engaged with this evaluation process of everything that's happening. That's part of growing together. That's part of what we're doing. So final question is you go through your list again and to put down your thoughts for each of these hows, for each of those points that you've got. So what questions would I ask? That's probably the key one there. And what system would I set up in order to be able to do this evaluation really well? So again, if we're going through Jay with his live stream example, he's saying, okay, what questions am I going to answer at the end of every live stream? And who am I going to answer those with? When will it happen? Because we've got to lay that all out in advance. If you've got Chris as a grow team leader, okay, what outputs is our team creating constantly? For each of those outputs, what questions are we going to answer? What are our goals for them? What are the specific questions what we need to answer to make it fruitful? How are we going to do that? When and where? Who's going to answer those? Let's set up a system for this. And yeah, my heart is that we can use that to become really fruitful and become a culture, a team that's always growing in what we're doing, always growing together. So, hope that's been helpful. Sorry it was a little bit longer than other ones, but there was a bit of stuff to go through. One of the reasons we had a bit more content is because at our touch point, we're not going to be doing a heap of group discussion. We're going to jump into groups pretty quickly, and we're just going to workshop the stuff that you've already written. So when you come with your notes, we're going to get the Grow team leaders to look together at each other's notes and to workshop that and evaluate and grow together and actually come out with some systems that we say we're going to have a crack at this. So we won't be doing a lot of the big group discussion at the touch point. It'll be more just hands-on practical workshops, which hopefully be a lot of fun and will be practical. And will be fruitful. So bless you guys. Appreciate you all. Look forward to seeing you Wednesday, September 7, I believe. First Wednesday in September. Until then, keep growing. Oh, there's my phone.